The Q&A is always something really fun for us. Oh, you got it recording. Good. Something that we really enjoy doing. And again, the goal, you guys know this, you've all been to this before, but we don't want to do any teaching tonight. We're not advocating for anything. We're not pushing an agenda. In fact, more than likely, there's three of us here this evening. That's three different life experiences, three different viewpoints. And so the likelihood of all of us agreeing on everything is going to be pretty small. I'm sure there are going to be some things that we don't agree on. Maybe we got Charles in the room. Maybe some things that are big or small. It doesn't really matter. The point is that we want to offer different perspectives and just kind of sort through how we answer questions about God and the Bible and faith and all of that in general. Like Jonah says, it is the dialogue that's important. And so the biggest thing is we just want to advocate for having conversations, right? Because we believe spiritual things are really important. Despite what's going on in the world around us and things like that, there's a lot to the Christian faith that I think is really important for us as believers to know how to sort through. And so that's the goal tonight. That's the point. That's why we do these Q&As. Also, we're not experts, except for Dr. Clay. He's an expert, but we are not.
I was about to say, Dr. Clay is
100% an expert.
He gets paid to be an expert.
That's right.
It's true. So, we might get a question and it'll be a good question. And the best we can say is we don't know. And so we're not afraid to say that. That's not what tonight's about for us kind of flexing that or anything like that. But let me introduce Dr. Clay. Most of you guys, I think actually all of you guys know me. I hope you know me. Most of you probably know Trey. Dr. Clay is our guest sort of Q&A panelist this evening. And so he is a religious studies professor at the ASU campus, teaching a couple classes next semester. If you're interested in taking one of his classes, I'd highly recommend it. Just in talking to him before we got going, he's he's just a good guy. Really knows what he's talking about, and he's in a library right now, which me and Trey are not, so he really knows what he's doing. He's teaching a class on religion and globalization in the spring. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Session A.
Yeah. If you're a student and you need something, a credit, or if you're just interested, I would highly encourage you to take that class. The other one you're teaching is religion, nationalism, and ethnic conflict. Is that also session A?
That's also session A. Yeah.
Yeah. So again,
that sounds really neat.
Really
like
timely.
That.
Yeah. Really interesting. Again, encourage you to take those classes. Your specialty, based on what we talked about, is more in the history of Christianity in Russia, Eurasia, sort of that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so we're grateful that he's here. We're grateful to have him. Super grateful that you took time out of your schedule of everything that you have going on to help us out with this. So be sure you say thank you to Dr. Clay for taking time. A couple things before we get started. Basically, like I said, there's no agenda tonight. We're just answering questions that you've asked. So really what that means is tonight will go as well as you decide for it to go. If we run out of questions and we end early, then we're done. But if you guys keep asking questions, then we'll keep going. We're looking to end around 8:30 or so. Of course, if you want to stay on longer than that, you can. But there are three ways that you can ask questions. And so the first way is entirely anonymous. Again, nothing really is off limits. In the past, we've done different topical questions, Q&As around certain topics, but tonight, just anything related to God, the Bible, Christianity, spirituality as a whole, life, anything like that. We want to be a resource. So nothing's off limits. If you have a question and you want to ask it anonymously, meaning none of us, not even me or Trey or Dr. Clay, will know who asked it, you can go to, there's a Google form that you can type out your question. I'm going to send a link to that Google form in the chat. So you can click on that link, go there, ask your question. I will be glancing over at it periodically. Again, let me get the link here. Super anonymous. There is no way that we will know who you are if you ask it. Second way you can ask a question, if you are okay with me knowing what the question is you can private message me here in the chat and I will know who it is, obviously. So if you're okay with me knowing, you can do that. And then lastly, at the end, if we run out of those questions, Yeah, Jonah's got it. Thanks so much, Jonah. I was having trouble with the link. If we run out of these questions, then we'll have an open time where you can just kind of speak up and do that. That being said, I sent out the Google link about a week ago, and we had some students already kind of fill in some questions that they had. And so we are just going to start with those questions. We're going to go straight down the line. And again, anytime you feel like it, ask a question in the chat, ask a question on the Google form, and we'll get around to those. So question number one, I think this is a really lighthearted, easy question for us to start with, meaning that it's not. Why were women treated as property in the Old Testament? It's a great question. Take it away.
Yeah, so that is a very good question. Some women, of course, were actually property in the sense of, you had slavery in the Old Testament. And so Hagar, for example, who's the concubine of Abraham, is his property. Of course, he sends her away twice, actually, even though she's the mother of his child, of his son Ishmael. But there are other women who are not property. So most women really weren't property, and you can see, for example, a good example of this, I guess, is Proverbs 31, which describes the kind of the ideal woman who is the person who watches over her household. And there she's described, obviously in idealized terms, but she's somebody who is her own person. She's the one who not only takes care of the food for the household, but she's also an entrepreneur. She goes out and she purchases vineyards, for example. She produces textiles not only for her own household, but she goes and sells them. So she's pictured as an entrepreneur. And then you have some other women who are quite active. The Queen of Sheba. She goes to see Solomon, and because she's been interested in what she's heard about him, and he treats her with a great deal of respect. Deborah in the book of Judges is actually the leader of Israel, the person to whom people come to have their disputes resolved. And of course, there's some kind of nasty women. Jezebel, in the Book of Kings, the wife of Ahab, is a very powerful figure, and someone who clearly has her own kind of political plans. Even if in the end she comes to a very bad end. So overall, women are. Yes, women are kind of under men. They are, there's a hierarchy. There's certainly a social hierarchy throughout most of the Old Testament. For most women are not, they are in some way subordinate to men. However, not all of them are property. Some of them are, but then of course that's true of men as well, because that's what slavery is where human beings are specifically property. I think it's important that all of the social institutions that are in the Bible are not necessarily what God intends for us to be, right? I mean, there's Jesus is pretty clear about this when in the Sermon on the Mount, where he contrasts the way things have been interpreted. You have heard that it was said to the men of old, you shall hate your neighbor and love your enemy. There is no command actually to hate. I'm sorry. What am I saying? Sorry. You shall hate your enemy and love your neighbor. That you've heard that it was said, you shall hate your neighbor and hate your enemy and love your neighbor. There is, of course, no command in the Old Testament to hate your enemy, but you do see a lot of the hatred of the enemy there, and But the social institutions are not necessarily divine or what God desires. Jesus says the same thing about divorce, right? Divorce is something, he says, that wasn't in God's ideal for marriage, but it was something that was allowed for the hardness of the human heart. Um, Having said that, I think the reality is a little more complicated than just having women. Not all women were slaves, fortunately.
Yeah, and I would just add a couple of things that have really helped me with my Bible reading is you have to understand the difference between descriptive and prescriptive. So there's a lot of times in the text where it's describing a situation. It's not saying this is how things should be. It's just declaring what is. And so I think that's really helpful. And also, I think there's only one hero in the Bible, and his name is Jesus. And I think when we put like Abraham on this pedestal to where he's perfect, then we declare, oh, having a concubine is okay because Abraham did. Well, no, Abraham is a sinner, right? These are all many of them point to Christ, and they have small pictures of what's to come. But it's, the faith of Abraham, of course, like we look to and we admire, but there's a lot of things that he's done. He wasn't a great man in many different ways. And so those two things help me a lot. Understand not everything is prescribing, okay, this is how it always should be. It's just describing the current situation, because I love how the Bible isn't a fairy tale. It's a true story of real people. It's even why I don't like calling people characters in the Bible. It almost makes it seem like it's such a story that we made up. And so real people have real problems. And I love how the Bible's not hesitant to just show those things. So those are my literal 2 cents to throw into that.
Yeah, I think that's good. Can you guys hear me? I had an issue with the mic and the AirPods and all that stuff. Yeah, I think all that's great. I don't really have much more to add. I think that it is important to look at like I think the descriptive, prescriptive is really helpful. It's also helpful to look at God's ideal. So like, Genesis 1:27, man and woman were both created in the image of God. And so like even that alone, when you compare that with other creation myths from surrounding areas, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, for anybody less than a king to be given the dignity of bearing the image of God, let alone a woman, I think was so countercultural and so different. Nobody had really had that before. And so that statement alone, I think, says a lot about God's view towards man and woman. And you can get into a lot of weird things that way, but I think
that's a great point. Yeah. The
Yeah.
other worldviews, like being a king, you're made in God's image. If you're not a
Right.
king, you're not made in God's image. That has huge implications.
And so for men to have that, and then women to have that, and then also like you think about the institutions that God is working with, the institutions that exist at this time, it's sort of like making the best of a broken system, of a sinful system marred by human selfishness and sinfulness. And so if you actually look at a lot of the laws of Deuteronomy and Leviticus and even Exodus a little bit, there's a lot of dignity and value given to women. So like the bride price, for example, a lot of people have issues with and I think this might be what you're referring to when you say property, is the husband would pay for, or the man would pay for, he'd give money to the family of the bride and say, I want to marry your daughter. And it seems like this transactional sort of unromantic relationship, but it was actually it was a way of protecting the girl and her family. So you have a girl who, if the husband were to die, the girl is taken care of because of that money that the husband paid. It's a way of signifying to the family that the husband is taking this relationship with intent and with seriousness. It's the same thing we do today with rings. Like essentially we're not really, but it kind of is this symbolic act of showing this is how much I love you. No, I'm just kidding. This is how much, how serious I am about our relationship. There's a second question that I think is similar and in this vein that I think we can answer while we're on this topic. Why did God permit concubines in the Old Testament? Why did God permit concubines in the Old Testament?
Fortunately, Caleb sent me some of these questions beforehand, and so I would say that the question about concubines is it's similar to the question, to my mind, that Jesus answers about divorce. Jesus is asked why Moses allowed a writ of divorce, and his response is to go back to the origins of marriage and to look at the second chapter of Genesis, and there he says, God created a man and a woman, and they become one flesh in marriage. So what God has put together, let no person rend asunder. And the reason that there's divorce is because of the hardness of the human heart. And I think this is from Matthew 19, is where Jesus discusses this. But so Jesus says it's actually the reason that you have divorce is because it's a kind of concession. In other words, and it's an interesting idea, because here one might say, well, why doesn't God just change people, right? I mean, why doesn't he just, if it's the hardness of the human heart, why doesn't he just soften the human heart, right? Why did he allow Moses to have to give a writ of divorcement, right? To institute this legal procedure of divorce, rather than take care of the interior problem that Jesus is pointing out. And I think, of course, it does point to something, that we're participants. I mean, we aren't passive. There is something that we actively, even though everything that we do is by God's grace, there's some way that we're actively participating in, and God is he is responding to what we do. So if we do have a hard heart, then he responds to it in this. And so I think that the answer to why does God allow concubines, at least part of the answer, it seems to me, is this: there is a kind of problem of the hardness of the human heart, and God is responding to us and allowing this. In other words, there is, the broader question is, why is there evil at all? Why is there any evil at all? And that that kind of gets at it. Jesus is saying, God is not going to just magically change things. We participate, and we also have to listen to him, and we're engaged in a relationship, we're not simply automatons. So I think that's a really great question. and I'm just giving a kind of a sketchy answer, but that's where I'd start.
No, that's great. I love that. Yeah, I think the broader question really is, why do people still sin? Like, why do bad things still happen? If God is all powerful and all loving, why would he not kind of coerce us into making the right choices and things like that? The other thing I'd point out too is, like, when you, again, similarly with the women dignity sort of thing, when you look at the actual laws, a lot of them were put in place to protect women who, someone just asked follow-up that I think is worth. Is there a point in the Bible that explicitly forbids concubines? Other than Genesis, what is it? Genesis, the man will leave his wife and two will become one flesh. I think other than that passage, I don't believe so, where there's a specific law against concubines. But there are laws put in place, like I was saying, to protect their dignity and their value. So some women, who were captured in war, for example, they had to live with the man who wanted to take her as a concubine for a year. And after that year, if she wanted to leave, then she could leave. So like she had freedoms there based on a moral law that God was giving to the Israelites that many other nations wouldn't have adopted. Same thing with like, parents could sell their daughters to be concubines, which is super awful. But again, the law is that she does it for, I think, 6 years. And then after that, those 6, she has the choice to stay or leave. And so it's, again, God intervening into a broken human system where he's making the most of protecting people within humans' fallen nature and the impacts of that on the systems around them. Do you have anything else to add, Trey?
Oh man, I thought I had something, and then I got caught up on what you're saying, and now I don't think I remember. So we're good.
Well, I would say that the Christian church very quickly went to monogamy. So I mean that's the rule in Christian societies generally is monogamy, and that of course is, you can see that in First Timothy, where kind of the leaders of the church are supposed to have one wife, no more than one wife, right? So that that gets it isn't exactly a prohibition against polygamy, but it is the ideal. It sets forth an ideal that that monogamy is what ought to be pursued, not polygamy.
Yeah, and I would say the biblical text is pretty clear. One of reasons like of Solomon's downfall is that he partook in polygamy and had many wives. I was going to add something that the prophets are very explicit about, and something that is a big conversation today, at least it should be, is the comfort that we can take is God doesn't coerce us, but justice will be served in this life or the next. And so I think that's the comfort, that's like the hope that we hold on to, that evil doesn't go unpunished. And so we love that when we are the one who is, being hurt at the hands of evil people. We hate it when we're the evil ones, and we wish that, maybe that rule didn't apply. But thankfully, by the grace of Jesus and the cross and the resurrection, we are forgiven of our sin for eternity. But the saints have really taken a lot of encouragement and hope. I think that's a lot of the book of Revelation. It's a hopeful, okay, I'm suffering now, but justice is going to be served, and we will eventually rule and reign with him.
So Trey's asking a question. So that being the case, why would God make compromises rather than delivering strict commandments? So adultery is a strict commandment, but concubines are apparently not held under that commandment. I would say they are. Again, the issue isn't, it's not so much because
that
you could apply that.
Yeah,
it would be. And you could apply that to any sin. You know what I mean? Like, leaving out the truth. There's no specific verse about like leaving out the truth in certain situations, but there is a commandment not to lie. And so like, why is that?
You know what I mean? Find a sin that doesn't fall within the 10 Commandments. I mean, everything boils down to those. It's like he knew what he was doing.
Yeah. So no, I think it is that idea that God doesn't coerce us. And again, and I think you also have to look at like, and this might be my like criminal justice, like policy background coming. The way that society was structured was not in favor of women who were without families. And so for a lot of women, again, it's not a justification for having concubines or being a concubine or anything like that. But for a lot of women, it was better to be a concubine than to be a prostitute, because as a concubine, you got a roof over your head, you got
clothing,
food and clothing. The husband was meant to take care of you, even though you weren't given the society's dignity as a wife, as a spouse. You were still given more than maybe what you had before. And so for a lot of women, it was a means of survival. And I think that God and his sovereignty, again, it's the Genesis, what Joseph says, what you intended for evil, God meant for good. And so I think God's ability to work in evil systems and bring about good and protect others is still a factor.
Yeah. And again, I think we put ourselves and pigeonhole ourselves and try to over-explain the bad things happening in the Old Testament when we believe it's a bunch of moral stories about being good, because all of them fall short. And so we need to call strikes and call balls when we see them. And it's like, yes, that was wrong. I agree with you. He shouldn't have done that. That gets you out of a lot of problems. And it's true, and the Bible, doesn't always say, and but sometimes it's like, just look at the rest of that person's life. Like, he had to pay for the consequences of doing those types of things.
That's great. I want to move on to, there's another question that is, I think, sort of related to what we were talking about, God coercing. Is God's patience infinite, like the rest of his character? And if so, why does he give some people over to sin?
Yeah, that is a really great question, and it's it touches on the mysteries, as a lot of these questions do, the mysteries of of our relationship with God. Is God's patience infinite? God himself is infinite, and God is described as someone who's slow to anger, right? He's slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love over and over again. And so, so yes, God's patience is infinite, but that's not, the danger is presumption, right? So where we presume that we can do what's wrong because God's patience is infinite. It's why does he give some people over to sin, right? And so this is another, this is in Jonathan Edwards, who was probably the greatest American theologian writing in the 18th century. He wrote a book called On Freedom of the Will, and he takes the Calvinist position that is, God does harden people's hearts. We see this in, of course, he cites the example of Pharaoh in the book of Exodus, and several times in the book of Exodus, Pharaoh is on the point of acceding to Moses's demands to let my people go, and God hardens his heart so that he doesn't do it. And I'm less convinced by this argument. I mean, I think there is some that there is, certainly God is there. There's a certain mystery about our relationship with God, and it's there are places where the Scripture uses literary language. So I'm less. I'm not exactly sure that I'm not exactly sure that Jonathan Edwards' argument for kind of double predestination actually works. I do refer you. He's much smarter than me, though. So I do refer you to this book if you want to explore that issue. Paul also talks about this, of course, in the first book of Romans, in the first chapter of Romans, where he essentially says that natural revelation, what we see in creation, should be enough to convince anyone that there is a God, right? But instead of worshiping the Creator, what we do is we worship the things he created, and then because of that idolatry, that leads to all the other problems. So in that case, it's kind of it seems to me that there Paul is saying the first problem of humanity is in fact idolatry. That's where everything all the problems come from. And that's, I guess, not so much a denial of God's patience, but proof of it. That is, God is sort of giving us the opportunity
Right.
to come to Him. We don't, but we. He's extending His hand, and the giving people over to other sins is a way, actually, of ultimately bringing us to Him, giving that possibility of turning to Him and away from the basic problem, which is idolatry. So I these are great questions, and I hope that gives us some food for thought. So
Yeah,
That's
and
great.
even Romans. So you mentioned Romans 1, and I would also add Romans 2. Romans 2:4, something I meditated on a couple months ago, and it really spoke to me a lot. It says, "Do you despise the riches of His kindness, restraint, and patience, not recognizing that God's kindness is intended to lead you to repentance? Because of your hardened and unrepentant heart, you are storing up wrath for yourself in the day of wrath, when God's righteous judgment is revealed." And so the problem is we believe God's patience is infinite, right? Eternal, but it's supposed to call us towards repentance. And if we do not repent, then we have misunderstood His patience, and eventually that will no longer be extended to you. And so that's really the message of salvation, right? And so we have to, as long as now is the time for salvation. And the biblical text talks a lot. I mean, the more and more you harden your heart, it gets harder and harder. And so now, soften your heart. I love it. I read this morning in the Psalms, David said, "Create in me a willing heart." And I think that should be the prayer for all of us.
Yeah, that's good. I also think of I think of the prodigal son. That narrative of the father. The issue wasn't that the father's patience ran out. It was that the son's patience with the father ran out. And so I think that a lot of times, we have to remember God's patience has a purpose, and that purpose is our repentance. And so the father's patience towards the prodigal son, the purpose was that the son would come back in a repentant heart, and that he would embrace all that the father has for him, and there would be restoration of that relationship. And so I think God's patience is infinite in the sense that it's qualitatively infinite, that there's nothing you can do to detract from it, that it's always available, that it's always, no one is too far from grace, right? But temporally, it's not always infinite, and that's dependent on us. And so I know it's not that God is put within a box, confines of our, actions and our will, but in a way he responds to them. And like you were saying, the dynamic between our relationship with God is a fluid dynamic, and it's a mystery. And there's something, I think, really, really powerful and really beautiful about that your actions have consequences. And it's not just, that's sort of the flaw of this hyper Calvinism, is that if everything's predetermined, it doesn't matter, and you're not to blame, and things like that. And so
yeah, I love how Dr.
Yeah.
Clay just mentions the mystery there. And I wish, I believed that Edwards, because making everything black and white makes life a lot more, just simple, but there is mystery. And I think we're in such a dualistic society. It's either this or that. And we can't imagine any sort of gray on anything. And I think that puts us in a lot of tough positions.
Yeah. Let's move on to another question. This one's interesting. Gluttony is a deadly sin. What does that gluttony look like today? Is it bad to like food? I would say no, 100%. It's not bad to like food. And that's my answer.
So this is really this is a great question. So the deadly sins, of course, that comes out of a monastic tradition. Evagrius Ponticus, who's this 4th century monastic thinker, comes up with a list of 8 sins, 8 deadly sins. But the idea is that these are sins that are produce other sins. They're kind of if you can control your thoughts, if you can control these 8, this is a way of sanctifying yourself, of being sanctified, right? So that it's a kind of discipline that comes out of the monastic practice of really trying to discipline the body and discipline the mind and the soul, so that you love God with all your heart. And all that genealogy goes back to Jesus. Of course, Jesus, he has a list of 13 evil things that come out of a man, that in the Gospel of Mark, he says, it's not what goes into you that defiles you, it's what comes out of you. And it includes, evil thoughts and immorality and adultery and theft and all of these things that are in the heart. But later on, after the 4th century, these the sins get, it's Gregory the Great, the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, who around the 6th century, the late 6th century, changes. He abbreviates the list into 7, and so we have 7 deadly sins. And if you want a really, really great book about the 7 deadly sins, it's Dante's Purgatory. Dante, the Italian poet, wrote a 3-part story about the afterlife, hell, purgatory, and paradise or heaven. And in purgatory is organized around the 7 deadly sins. I'm getting to the point here, but the idea is gluttony. What is gluttony? Why is it a deadly sin? And for I think Dante has a really great answer, and that is, there are some things that you love that are good, but you love them too much, right? And he in fact take these 7 sins, and he says sometimes you love evil, right? And so there are 3 sins that are loving evil. These are the worst ones. So that's pride, envy, and pride, envy, and wrath, I guess. Yeah, pride, envy, and wrath are where you're loving, you love the evil to somebody else. But the 4 other sins, which are lust, gluttony, sloth, and greed, you're loving something either too much or too little. So for gluttony and lust and greed, you're loving food too much. You're loving money too much for greed. You're loving sex too much for lust, right? These and if you're a sloth, you're not loving your duty enough. So you're not loving. So it's all a question of what he says, misdirected love. Either it's misdirected love where you're loving something evil, with pride, envy, and wrath, or it's insufficient or excessive love where you're loving something too much. So if you love food too much, yes, that's a problem, right? If you're loving food so that it's not so that it's harming you, right? I mean, that's really when it gets down to it. If you eat too much, it hurts your health. If you're that becomes that's the problem. I would say John Climacus, who was an abbot in the 7th century, he says, gluttony is the mother of all sins. And in gluttony, it's gluttony that, Adam and Eve were gluttonous for the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So it's that's the root of all of our problems is gluttony. So Dante has a nice answer, though. I think it's okay to like food, but you do it in proportion to what to your health and what's right.
Man, I'm loving I just love your answers. This is amazing. And the history lessons is fantastic. The only thing that has been really helpful for me in my own life. So I'm somebody who tend towards gluttony, both of food and just experience. And so just always just never having enough. And so I've really learned, the fruit of the Spirit are like the antithesis of the deadly sins, and so like with gluttony is self-control, and so another way to look at it too, something I've read before, really view these as keystone habits. The idea of keystone habits, you do these things and then it leads to more. And that's exactly what you're saying with, in the negative sense, these are deadly sins because they give birth to all the others. But on the other side, if I don't want to engage in gluttony, I'm engaging in self-control, especially for a lot of college students who struggle, with viewing things online. We'll just keep it at that, and those kind of things. For example, gluttony, if you practice fasting, disciplining your body once or twice a week to not engage in food for certain times, you're training your body, you're training yourself to say no to these desires in order to pursue a greater desires of being with the Father. And that's a keystone habit, where if you control and just, like, okay, yeah, I'm going to control what I eat, how often, it actually has benefit to the other sins that you have of the flesh. And so those things compound upon each other. And I think it's really helpful. The other thing, I love the whole desire too much or too little. I also love C.S. Lewis's perspective. The biggest problem we have is that we all desire too little. Anytime you sin, it's like playing with mud pies. Meanwhile, Holiday by the Sea is just down the road, and you can enjoy all that God has for you. So I think it's really helpful for us to say, why engage in gluttony? Ironically, that is one of the there is more to eat from, right? There's more to enjoy than to just try to distract yourself with these types of pleasures, which again, those are good things, but when we make them God, expect them to be perfect, that's when they get perverted and they lead us down destructive paths.
Yeah, I think it's great. I don't have anything else to add except one. I think the lie that we can be tempted to believe, especially as college students, as young people, as young adults, is that our lives are compartmentalized. And so if you are somebody who overindulges in experiences, whether they be physical or whatever, food, for example, if that's something you struggle with, the lie that you tell yourself is that there is a disparity between what you do with your body, as in what you put into it and what goes out of it, and your spiritual life. And I think the Christian view of the soul of the human being is that everything we do is so intertwined. Yes. That what you do with your body has such a dramatic effect. It's a holistic spirituality. This idea that we aren't souls in a body. We are souls, and our body is a part of our souls, and it affects our relationship with God and with others. And so when you think about things like that, when you sort of study the holistic nature of Christianity, of our faith in that regard, then everything you do with your body bears more weight. Be it overindulging in food unhealthily, or, sexual immorality, things like that, or even like how you spend your time, your habits, your laziness, like your inability to get out of bed, things like that will have an effect on your spiritual life as well, in a way that might not be obvious at first, but I really believe like there's a reason, the commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's the totality of our being that relates us to God. So
that's good.
I think that's great. I think here's another question that I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on, because I don't really have an answer. I mean, I have an answer, but is purgatory real? Go.
So purgatory, of course, is not. It's rejected by. There are three great branches of Christianity: Protestantism, Catholicism, and Orthodoxy. Purgatory is only accepted by Catholicism. Both Orthodox Christians and Protestant Christians generally reject it. And what I'm talking about there in purgatory is some kind of, it's a state where one is purged of one's sins after death, right? This is, and I'm a Protestant. I don't accept the idea of purgatory. It is the Protestant critique of purgatory is simply that it suggests that Christ's sacrifice is insufficient, and so that and I accept that critique. The the idea behind purgatory, which is developed over a long period of time and became part of Catholic doctrine in the it was formally accepted, I think, at the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, um, in the 13th century. The idea behind that is simply that sanctification, the process of salvation, is complicated and takes a long time, and so logically it would take even longer, and it of course supports um, that practices in both the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church of praying for the dead. That is, that prayers for the dead have can help those who've departed. I should say that in Catholic doctrine, and certainly you'd see this in Dante, who was Catholic and did believe in purgatory. The people in purgatory are saved. That is, eventually they're going to get to heaven. They are simply their sanctification is not yet finished. So for me as a Protestant, right, I would say purgatory is helpful in that it is at least I really like Dante's Purgatory. Okay, so I'll let you know. I'm going to put it in the chat so you can look at it yourself. That it's online. You can look at it if you want to read it, but it's helpful in thinking about the Christian life and the process of sanctification, right? But I would say it's purgatory is really a this worldly thing. That is, every Christian is undergoing the process of sanctification, right? We generally speaking, we think of sanctification, salvation as having three parts, and often, like, I'm a Baptist, so I'll say I was saved in 1972, right? So there's a moment when I'm saved, but actually what I mean by that is I was justified.
Right.
That's the moment I became a follower of Jesus, and I was justified at that moment. But my salvation actually is something that's going to take my entire life, because it is the process. It is not simply the point of justification. It's also this process of becoming like Jesus, right? That's right. And that when we become disciples of Jesus, we're then part of this journey of becoming like him. The First John says that we will be like him when we see him, right? When we see him, we will be like him. So we're being conformed to the image of Jesus, and that process is a process which will take our entire lives. So I don't accept the idea of purgatory. I don't think that it is a biblical idea. That there's a process of purgation after death. However, I think the idea behind it, the idea of the need for sanctification, and the recognition that sanctification is something that takes a long time, it can be difficult. Those are all very valuable ideas. And of course, the end is glorification. So there's justification, sanctification, and glorification. That glorification is that moment when we do see Jesus and we are like him, and we've been transformed thanks to his sacrifice on the cross and his in the power of his resurrection.
Yeah, that's great. Only a little bit I'd add. That's perfect answer, but I'll just say, that's one of the biggest problems Martin Luther had. What kind of started the Reformation, and really purgatory was such a way for the priests to manipulate people and to guilt them into giving more, and claiming, hey, if you give here, your dead grandfather, they'll go from purgatory into heaven. And so a huge source of manipulation. So that's a problem there. I think I think it's the Orthodox. That's the one I'm least informed on, Dr. Clay. But something I appreciate about them is, they use the word theosis a lot. And in the Christian life, there is this process of becoming like God, becoming godlike, godly. And I think as Baptists, I'm a Baptist as well, we make such an emphasis on justification, as we rightly should, but there needs to be an emphasis on sanctification. And this is a process we need to engage in. I know once saved, always saved. We kind of use that, and then we can just live our lives. So has fruit really, has the Holy Spirit really taken root in your life? And even some Protestants, one of my favorites is Dallas Willard. And I don't know where I land with what he says about this, but he makes the argument that there's not a purgatory, but he makes the argument that possibly in heaven, there still is a process of maturity for us to go through. And so it's pretty, it's just something interesting. I don't know if a ton of Protestants say that, but he saw such an importance for us to see why it's so important for us to go through that process of becoming like Christ now. And it's really a joyful thing. So his argument is it's a joyful thing to do. Of course, I don't know how long, he doesn't know how long it take, but he imagined that just we go to heaven, boom, everybody's perfectly all the same. He imagined that there's still some room for growth on the other side. Again, I don't know where I land on that. I just recently read that, and he didn't use the language of purgatory at all. But yeah, I like you're saying, I do, the thing I see valuable in it is emphasizing sanctification, and we need to emphasize all three. And glorification. I can't wait for that day. Lord knows we all need it. We all fall short, and I look forward to becoming like him.
Yeah, that's great. In that vein, this idea of glorification and being like God and how much we need that today, we had a couple of people ask a question similar to this, I guess reworded in my own words. Here's what I would say. Here's what I would ask. How should Christians think and relate to politics? When is it sinful for us to vote or not vote for somebody? Again, a couple questions on that. Shifting gears a little bit. This is more of a practical sort of, I imagine our answers might be a tad different. Given that the last presidential debates are tonight, I think it is a timely one. So how should Christians relate to politics? Is it ever sinful to vote or not vote for somebody?
Well, I think that the scriptures are very clear about our responsibility to our neighbors. Participating in politics is fulfilling that second command that Jesus said is the most important, which is the two that are most important: to love God with your whole being, right? That's the first one, and then the second one is like it, he says, and that is to love your neighbor as yourself. And being involved in politics, especially in a democratic society like ours, is really fulfilling that command. And I would say, the problems that we face, the problems that our leaders face, are pretty complicated. And it is, I think it's also helpful to have some grace. That there are in many of the issues that we're facing as a society are not at all simple with clear answers. There are trade-offs, and I think it would be good to have some grace for people who see things differently, and to try to really understand that. And certainly, I, as a professor, I mean, that's my hope is that, I want to open minds, and I want to open ears, and I also want to be listening to other people. All these, so the question is so the first part is, I think it's very important for Christians to be involved in politics and to take their responsibilities as citizens seriously. I do not believe that Jesus says, I did not take you out of the world, when he, in the farewell discourse in the Gospel of John, chapters 14 through 17, when he's speaking to the disciples before his arrest and crucifixion. He tells them he didn't take them out of the world. But they should be of good cheer because he has overcome the world, right? That's the and so we live in the world. We're not supposed to. And Paul says something very similar. that in fact we do have this worldly responsibility. Um, I think that the time where there are probably cases where it's sinful to vote for somebody. I don't think I've had such an occasion personally. I mean, I don't think we're facing that right now in the United States. I mean, I think there are. I think everybody in our democratic system is imperfect, and I have my own political views and that I hold quite strongly, which I won't share here. But I'm not. I don't. I I do think it would. I would say these two things. It's important to take your responsibilities as a citizen seriously. That's part of being loving your neighbor, and I think it's helpful to have some grace. I mean, really, to be praying for our leaders because they however imperfect they are, right? They need God's because they're imperfect, not that because they're imperfect, they need God's grace. And they need God to give them compassion and wisdom. So those are the things I would say.
Yeah, that's great. I think, we don't want to get into specifically what's happening and who we're voting for in our political views, but I love that the second commandment, which isn't lesser than the first, to love your neighbor as yourself. I think that's a misconception that loving God is first and foremost, and if you get around to it, then you love your neighbor. The two go hand in hand, right? John talks about this in his gospel, and in his First John, we talk about this. I think that if that's the guiding force of your interaction with politics, then I think that it's pretty safe to say that it's hard to sinfully vote. And I would agree with Dr. Clay. I think there are situations where it is probably sinful to vote for somebody. I would also agree that we are not in that situation today. And I know that there are some people who feel strongly that we are in that position today, especially when you bring up one issue voting and things like that. And I'm trying to be really careful. I also don't think it's helpful for us to weigh sins against each other. In that I don't think it's helpful for us to, like we can make much out of policy and procedure. And I was Trey and I were talking about this morning. There's a great article, regardless of how you feel about him. John Piper put out something this morning that I think was actually really helpful. And I don't agree with Piper on everything, but I really appreciate his viewpoint
for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he talks about, we're quick to bypass certain qualities and sins for the sake of other qualities and sins. But the reality is that sin is sin, and it affects all of us differently. And for us to ignore the fact that the character of our leaders will have an effect on the country, on the church, on people who follow the leader, to ignore that truth, I think that is ignorant and maybe not sinful, but I think it's ignorant. And so we have to be careful with what we're willing to justify and what we're willing to okay, and acknowledge that nobody's perfect. And at the end of the day, if you're loving your neighbor, if that's your guiding force, not protecting your own, we're citizens of the kingdom, not just of America. And at the end of the day, if America, God forbid, just goes kaput and there is no America, we should continue living our lives as Christ followers, regardless. And I think that if that's your guiding force of loving your neighbor as yourself, praying for those in leadership, extending grace to those who are different, then yeah, I think good insight.
Yeah. I would just add, Edward Freeman talks about the signs of an anxious society, and one of the biggest ones is just that we love the quick fix solutions, but they're just band-aids, and really a lot of what's going on in our country needs a deep healing, and we need surgery. And so, but we just want to quick and hurry up and vote and think that, okay, now everything's going to be good. And the reality is the biggest way to change society is for the church to be the church. I'm not going to repeat everything I said on Sunday. I know only like half were there, but anyways, if the church rose up and became community for people and gave people, a sense of purpose and direction, and loved people, I really think we'd see less hate in the world. I think we'd have less problems. The laws wouldn't be as important as they are right now, because, changed hearts are a lot better than anything else. And that's what our God can do. And I think it's just, we have to be the biggest thing that I'm weary of is, pathological dualism, which is one side is unimpeachably good and the other side is irredeemably bad. And so I think if Christians are voting right now with a sense of arrogance and saying those who vote any other way than what I have voted is now an evil person, I think there's stuff to grieve on all sides. And I think we just have to really approach this whole thing with humility, but I think we do need to get involved and recognizing at the end of the day, this is love for neighbor, love for my city, love for my state, love for my nation, and really love for my God, because every man and woman is made in the image of God.
Yeah, you can't. One more thing. You can't vote sin away, and you can't legislate sin away. And I think that there's a tendency to believe that our vote has that much power to where we will, our votes will make people stop sinning, and legislation will make people stop sinning. And that's just not true. And so, I love that idea of the church stepping up and being the church.
What MLK has that great quote about sure, it won't change hearts, but it'll protect me. I forget the way he says the quote is pretty brilliant, but it's essentially yes, laws won't change people, but they do obviously serve a purpose, and they do serve a protection that otherwise that we wouldn't have without it. And I know that's what you're saying, but I'm just to add to that. There obviously is a purpose to it, but it won't be the ultimate answer that we're all hoping and praying for.
Right. Casting your vote and doing nothing else to love your neighbor is not. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, is that, and we can get into that at varying topics. If you'd like to stay after the Q&A, I will talk more freely once we're not recording. Let's do a few more. We got about 8 more minutes. And again, if people want to stay on longer, you are more than welcome to stay on longer, including our panelists. If you guys want to stay on, we can keep doing this, but I want to respect all of our time. I think this one's interesting. If everyone from every religion has spiritual experiences, can personal experience be used to prove the existence of God? I think there are some semantics in there that might alter the question, but it's an interesting question. So if everybody from every world religion has experiences, can we still use our religious experience to prove the existence of God?
Yeah, this is my colleague Norbert Samuelson, who retired some years ago, as the philosopher in he was one of the people who, I'm trained as a historian, so I have a different training. I'm not really, there's a whole branch of philosophy about the proving the existence of God. And I guess I would say about, I think it's very hard to, when you're talking about something like the existence of God, you are speaking about fundamentals, like a prioris. That is, these are not, it's not like, these are fundamental principles. And so they're, in order to decide what to define what proof means, you generally need the principles first. That's you need to have a definition of what proof is, and the fact is that faith in God is before that. So it's I think that the proofs about God's existence are more about thinking about His nature. And rather than having a proof like, say, the a Euclidean proof, a geometrical proof, or the binomial theorem. The thing is that in mathematics, of course, you start out with undefined terms and with a set of assumptions, and the belief in God is more like those founding parts of mathematical system, than they are like the proofs that come afterwards. But the question is pretty interesting. I mean, how one of the questions that you have is what if you're talking about God's existence, what evidence is there, and is personal experience evidence? And if it is, how heavy is it? I mean, how convincing is it? I think those are really good questions. Because we know that personal experience can be quite varied, right? Then there's the people experience all kinds of things, and people are easily fooled. This leads us to being careful about personal experience, right? But there's no question that in fact personal experience is probably what brings us all here, right? It really is. I mean, the idea that in the end, God speaks to you and God calls you, that call of God is and that call of God, which is independent of you, but which you experience. That's that's something that's very powerful. Philosophically, I think that's a really interesting question. I want to think more about it. But Blaise Pascal, who is a French mathematician and a philosopher, writes in he wrote this kind of journal called Thoughts that he published as Thoughts. There he cries out for personal experience with God that goes beyond the proof. So, he says, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, not the God of the philosophers, the God of personal experience, the God who meets Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's the God, essentially, that's the God I want. You're going way beyond my expertise, but those are a few thoughts. As Jesus says, you need to judge for yourselves what is right. I encourage you to explore this because I think these are great questions.
Yeah, a lot of my Mormon friends really use that as like their cornerstone to not, this is what I feel is right. And so, from my perspective, well, in that case, it doesn't matter how you feel. There's other reasons here to point that's not right. I think the four sources we use in understanding God and understanding Christ and all of these things in this order would be Scripture, tradition, reason, and experience. And I think we have to keep those constantly in line. And we have to, I think it's ignorant for a pastor to say, I just believe the Bible and that's it. I don't have any other influence. Well, you do. It's inevitable. And so tradition, we gladly draw from tradition. That's why I love Dr. Clay talking right now, just pulling out people in the 6th century and the 12th century. I think that really helps us and informs us. One of my favorite books I've ever read is Historical Theology by Greg Allison, because it teaches you theology, but here's how we've believed it throughout history, and here's how it's changed. That really helps inform you. So we need to draw back to our traditions. We ought not be ashamed of it. And then reason, is this logical? Of course, there's an allowance for mystery in a lot of things, but at the same time, there needs to be, some clarity, and use our reason that God gave us. And then there is experience. Like, praise the Lord for those mountaintop experiences. Praise the Lord that He gives us emotions. Emotions matter, but they're terrible master. So their feelings are great. They're not the ultimate, but we're so grateful for that gift. And I think it's helpful to look at it that way: Scripture, then tradition, then reason, then experience.
Yeah, one thing, and then I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll call it a night. I think that it's really easy to idolize experience. And I think that, Dr. Clay, you touched on this, where experience can be manipulated and it can be exploited. And I think that you can gain a lot of followers by getting good at crafting and creating artificial experience. And so I think any true experience you have with God will not leave you yearning more for that experience, but it'll leave you yearning more for God. And so like every encounter that that Jesus had with people that he healed, that he touched, that he taught, people were astounded by him. Not just, I mean, it was the teaching and it was the healing and things like that, but ultimately people were drawn to his nature and his person. And so every, and of course we could get into, it's a whole other topic of what do we do when people, you know, who are Muslim, for example, have visions of Allah, who, or, you know, of a different religion, they have these supernatural experiences. I think that's a little bit of a different question, probably something that we can't get into today. But I think all of our experiences point to, but then you have like Paul, who had an experience with Christ on the road to Damascus, and that was enough to change his life forever. And so, yeah, I love those four. I'm glad you brought those up, because I think that when those are in alignment, then yeah, you can use experience as a evidence for God's existence. I think this is a great question to end on. And then, like I said, if people want to stay on longer, we'll turn the recording off, and you can really ask your questions. But this last question, I'd like for all of us to kind of answer, which we have been. But if you were not religious, and you had every religion from all of history presented to you, would you choose Christianity, and why?
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, when I teach this course, Religions of the World, I've asked students why they're taking it. And I was surprised at some of the answers I got. Well, one was, you know, I'm really not satisfied with the religion I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of interested, you know, it's like a catalog, right? A mail order catalog, and we can look through it. I can pick one, you know, and very often these were lapsed Catholics. They grew up Catholic and they're not really satisfied with Catholicism, but, you know, and I a part of it, of course, may come from, you know, they feel like they have to write something down. In my little survey, so, you know, it may not really reflect what they feel, but it is, you know, one of the things I'd say is that there are a number of assumptions in the question that I'd like to just unpack, and that is, one is that this whole question about what a religion is. And that's actually something, is, you know, I'm in religious studies. That's something that the question of how to define religion and what, you know, what exactly a religion is, what makes up a religious tradition. Those are really very the questions that are quite alive, and there's a lot of discussion and debate about it, and whether you can actually meaningfully define religion in a way that's universal. You know, the question assumes that there is, that there's a kind of coherence to these traditions, and these are perfectly okay. But the problem is, of course, if I were such a person, right, then I would not be the person that I am. We're all you know, we all come from families. We're all, you know, made in the same way, essentially, right? We all grow up within certain context. We're all shaped, and so who I am is shaped by the faith of my family, the community that I belong to. And you can't imagine a human being, right? Maybe something else, some other kind of being, but who would be able to make that choice. So there's a kind of, but the question itself sort of separates me from my humanity in a way, you know, that I'm not sure that works. And then there's the problem of what is a religion. Even in Christianity, of course, there are many different varieties of Christianity. So if we think about is religion just belief? And this is one of the big arguments in religious studies. Is religion just belief? So Edward Tyler in the 19th century said, he defined religion as belief in spiritual beings, right? That's a very, very simple definition. It's really good, but but it leaves out a lot, right? In other words, Emil Durkheim a little bit later said, well, no, religion doesn't even have to have a spiritual being in it. You've got certain kinds of Buddhism that you could call atheistic. And so what's really important about religion is beliefs, practices, sacred things, and a moral community. This is what makes up a religion, so it's a very, very different kind of thing. I would say that it is that what I want to be is in relationship with God, right? That I want to be in relationship with the living God, Christianity, the teachings of Jesus, is the revelation of God. How that I think is something a little different than saying, having a menu of religions. But it centers, and of course it's a very Protestant answer. I'll confess, this is a very Protestant answer. This is, God breaking through in history and calling to us. But it's a human answer because, I'm not the kind of person, I wouldn't be human if I, could just slough off all my the context of where I come from. But I hear the call of God, and I seek to follow Him, and that is yes, that's what I choose. Of all the different spiritual possibilities, that is the one I choose. And if I don't choose it, it's a failing on my part. I hope that makes some sense.
That's great.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Trey?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't need to add anything to that. I will just add these two things I just said. But one, I just put this in the link. I think this is really helpful. This book, Christian Theology, by Christopher W. Morgan. It's a systematic theology, but it's so precise and succinct. And I think this helps answer a lot of questions that you guys may have. And I think it's really readable. So I encourage you to do that. He was my dean at California Baptist University. He's a great mentor of mine and really well respected a theologian in the field. And I love the way of Jesus because I think our doctrine is clear and our direction is compelling. When I look at everything else, it seems that other religions, there's not a lot of clarity. It seems to add and take away. And a lot of times it's not very compelling. It's like even your view of the world, that doesn't seem very beautiful. And I love that the way of Jesus is good. It's true. And it's beautiful. And that's where I put a lot of my hope in, and just the way of Jesus. And like Dr. Clay said, I get to have a personal relationship with a living God. It doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, I love those answers. I think that it's like, that really is the best way to frame it, is everything, because you have to understand, I like the way you put it, if you have a menu of religions, you come to the realization at some point in your life, or at least the hope is that at some point in your life, that everything that you feel is missing in your life, the joy, the peace, the satisfaction, the acceptance, the love, the community, the fellowship, the relief, freedom, things like that, can only be found if there is a God. If there is no God, then you have no assurance of any of those things. The freedom from sin, from depression, from struggle, from bad habits, even from anger, from whatever it is. If there is no God, you have no freedom. If there is a God, then you have choices to make, and every other world religion will tell you that you have to make those right choices. to get to that God, that there are things that you have to do. And if you're deemed worthy, if you do enough of those things, then you will find what you're looking for, the freedom, the joy, the satisfaction, the acceptance, all of those things. Only our faith, only the way of Jesus. In short, the reason that I would choose Christianity is because of Jesus, because Jesus, as the embodiment of God, Christianity offers us the only hope of God coming down to us. We don't have to work our way up the mountain. Jesus comes down and carries us up the mountain, right? If we're stuck in a hole of sin, of despair, even if life's going great, if we're stuck and the things that we're searching for, we can't find because we're stuck in this hole, every other religion will throw you a rope. Jesus will actually come into the hole with you and carry you out. And I think that's the best, really the best news that there is, that it's not just about going to heaven when you die. It's about having freedom and having life. Jesus says life and life in abundance, really experiencing what that is today, that there is hope for tomorrow, not just for the afterlife, but there is hope for tomorrow. I don't think any other worldview, any other religion can offer you that type of hope. And I think that following the way of Jesus is, like you said, it's so compelling because it's so counterintuitive. It's the only worldview that shows us that the way things are now is not how they were meant to be, right? The way that the world is going now is not how it was meant to be. And that's the greatest news, the greatest source of comfort, that there is a design for things, and that the way of Jesus, as backwards as it is, and as hard and difficult as it is, right? Jesus says you have to deny yourself, literally die, kill yourself to follow me. That's how discomforting it is. But the joy and the freedom that you have found in Christ, I think is far outweigh the sacrifice. So that's what I would say. It is past 8:30. Thank you guys for sticking on, for asking questions. I think those were really great questions. You guys are really smart. And